Cheers.
Cheers. Welcome to Culture Night,
where each week we drink fancy wine and watch movies that are in some way culturally significant. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Sarah. And we are back for season 5, episode 1. We are here. It is a new season. We can kind of jump right into a podcast business. Is that this is our first episode of our new season. We finished up season 4, which was our science fiction season, and learned a lot. I think we were talking about it last night. I think that's the one I've taken the most from so far.
Yes, surprisingly, there was a lot that we learned and kind of were able to see the progression throughout each movie and decade and just the cultural impact from each of those movies.
And not that I loved the movies necessarily, but I think I learned so much about the film industry and just appreciated so much how much technology progressed both in the movies and just like the actual filmmaking process. I think it was really, a really cool experiment to watch all of those in a row.
Yeah. This is going to be quite a different season than last season.
I think it's probably good that we took a couple weeks break in between so that we weren't just like in the middle of that heavy technology science-based place moving into romantic comedies. But I'm really excited.
Should we also talk about the other podcast business as we talk about what we're drinking tonight?
I think we should talk about it. Do you want to talk about it? Or do you want me to talk about it?
Sure. First, we'll introduce our wine. It is the 2021 Josh Reserve Cab Sav, still from Paso Robles. We're not reaching too far out of our comfort zone, but.
So we are in a place where we have really just made a good dent in our reserves of Tobin James. If you've been following along, we've done like 45, 46 plus episodes exclusively drinking that wine. We clearly had been hoarding it for a while, but we are kind of in a place where we don't really want to drink all the stuff that we have left. The stuff we're kind of saving for nicer occasions. And our next shipment, we get 2 shipments a year as Wine Club members. Our next shipment comes in the next month or so. We're not exactly sure when. So we decided that to really lean into the romantic comedy theme, that we would just go with some grocery store wine.
Yeah, it's not quite cheap red wine. Like, it's medium shelf.
I was going to say cheap red wine, but I was like, this isn't the cheapest stuff.
No insult to Josh, but more approachable, more middle of the shelf wines.
And hopefully you'll be able to find some of these wines in your grocery store. I know Tobin James is not as easy to find in just your everyday grocery store. So we are just doing some more accessible wine this time. And hopefully if you are also enjoying these same wines while you are listening to the podcast, let us know what you think.
Yep. And we will let you know what we think as we give this wine the old sniff test and then give it a taste.
Did you say it was a Cab Sav?
Yes, it is a Cab Sav. Ooh, very berry, jammy on the nose.
Yeah, I was going to say it's very fruity.
Still got a little bit of like that, like leather kind of smell, like deep in there.
Very deep, but I kind of see it.
That's the reserve part of it.
Yes. I mean, it's definitely not cheap red wine. But it is also different from what we have been drinking. Fairly
sweet. Obviously, we had like the jammy flavor on the nose there, but honestly, a little bit sweeter than I was expecting. The tasting notes on it talk about aromas of red fruits backed by powerful scents of black peppercorn. On the palate, the wine features flavors of raspberry, coffee, and vanilla with bold tannins and a long, smooth finish.
I get the vanilla.
Yeah, definitely get the vanilla.
That makes it seem really complex, but this feels a lot more simple, I think, compared to the nicer wines that we've been drinking from Tobin James. So I don't know. It's definitely one of the better Cab Savs I've had from the grocery store for sure. And I got excited when I saw this. It was on a little end cap thing at our store and saw that it was from Paso Robles. And I was like, well, I guess I guess we'll start here.
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit of that, some of that coffee flavor too from it.
Yeah, I can see it, especially like kind of paired with the vanilla.
Yeah, more so on the
seeing
finish.
as I drink vanilla creamer often in my coffee, those two go hand in hand for me. All right, so check back in the after show to see how we rate this. Are we going to come up with a new rating system? Or are we going to rate it on our wine scale?
That's a very good question.
We'll have about 2 hours during the movie to think about it.
I'll let you guys know in the after show.
And now we are going to go behind the screens, where we go behind the big screens of Hollywood and learn more about some aspect of film production or storytelling.
Nailed it. First try.
Clearly, we've taken a couple weeks off. Feeling a little rusty. So anyways, Tonight, I was in charge of Behind the Screens, and I decided just to do a little deep dive on romantic comedies since we are entering into this genre, a little bit of the history behind it, and just some things to get us going as we start this new season. So this is copy and pasted from Wikipedia. The definition, according to Wikipedia, of a romantic comedy is that the basic plot of a romantic comedy is that two characters meet, part ways due to an argument or other obstacle, then ultimately realize their love for one another and reunite.
Bad communication is, I think, generally the main culprit there.
Yeah, honestly, it makes me very angry at this point. I think, especially too, I feel like we've been married long, like for a while now. Like I feel like we're really like settled in our relationship, and not that we were not perfect by any means, but I watch these movies or I read romantic comedy books, and I'm just like, oh, if you would just talk to each other, none of this would be a problem.
But then we wouldn't have a movie.
Exactly. So I try to go with the flow, but it does make me very frustrated.
You and me both.
Yeah. And then the comedies go back to as far back as ancient Greece and have often included some sort of sexual or social elements. So that's kind of where the beginning of the romance part of the comedies comes from. All the way back in ancient Greece.
The Greeks and the Romans were much hornier than you might think.
Oh,
and
yeah.
The whole romance was more of like probably closer to sexual comedies.
Definitely. I got a little bit more of a note on that in a minute too. And so we kind of, like we talked about, it was very sexual beforehand. And it wasn't until like the Western European medieval period where they really started to bring actual romance into novels, and like the term romance came to refer more to romantic love rather than the heroic adventures of medieval romance. So I imagine a lot of like the Odyssey of like she's there, but it's not all about like the falling in love part. It's kind of like a subplot, or more like almost like Shrek 2 of like, I'm gonna go save this princess from
more focused
the
on
castle.
The man and doing those kind of things.
And it's like a heroic act of like, I'm gonna save her and she will just love me, but like clearly that's not what romance really is.
The woman was more of a plot point as opposed to a major character in it.
And then into the 20th century as Hollywood grew, and I feel like what I think we're gonna notice a lot is like as society progresses, that's really when the romantic comedies started to shift. I think in the science fiction, we saw a lot of like how the technology progressed, both in the movies and in the filmmaking. But I think what we're going to take a lot from this is how society has shifted and like what our views on romance and relationships are. And I'm really excited to see how that kind of shifts.
For sure. Obviously, we won't be going all the way back to the ancient Roman time periods. We're going to be starting with a much slightly more modern time period. But I think we will still see quite a large shift based on the decades that we'll be exploring this season.
I also thought it was interesting that it was talking about like, in the 1900s, Hollywood was changing and that the comedies kind of developed into subgenres such as screwball comedy, the career woman comedy, which just made me laugh as like, that's a genre. Okay.
Is it funny because she wanted a career?
Right. I guess so. And then I think that was like 40s and 50s was the time period on that. And then the sex comedy, which kind of goes back to your ancient Greek thing. I am interested. It was talking about like Rock Hudson as being a part of this sex comedy genre that I'm interested to see what that definition is in that time period. So maybe one day we will deep dive that carefully.
Get to that part of history.
And then the last thing, it's kind of similar to if you were following along in season 2, how we had How Noir You Are. I don't know how we will necessarily play into this, but I found this thing that was 9 elements of a rom-com. And I think maybe it's not necessarily a score system, but more of something for us to pay attention to as we watch these movies and see if we can like check all these things off as we watch the movies. So the 9 elements of a rom-com, according to this website, there are 2 lovable leads. Obviously, they got to fall in love with somebody. Then there's a meet cute, so somehow they meet. And then some sort of unique or troublesome situation happens. There's also at least one great sidekick on one side or the other. I did mention like when Harry Met Sally, there was more than one, but that's why there's at least one. There is a super fun montage. I feel like that's going to get hot and heavy in the 90s. I feel like montages are such a like late 80s, early 90s thing. So I'm excited to see that. And then the relationship is in jeopardy. And then there's a light bulb moment. And then some kind of grand gesture or epic line and a happy ending. So
like raising a big boombox. And
oh man, there was an example from one of the movies that we've seen and I forget what it was, but so those are just kind of, I was watching it or reading this list and I was just like thinking of every movie and being like, yep.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
But it got me very excited. So
I'll see what I can do to brand that checklist.
I was like also trying to like search for something like How Noir You Are, because I do feel like that really helped us kind of like buy into it. And I feel like romantic comedies are such a similar to that, where you see the same stuff, especially like a montage and there's a friend and like all that kind of stuff. So I'm interested to see how the rest of the season plays out, or this whole season plays out, and how we feel at the end of it. But with that, I think, are you ready to jump into the season and start with what we're watching tonight?
Let's do it. So tonight we are watching Breakfast at Tiffany's from 1961.
I'm very excited.
It is rated G, but as we've seen in previous seasons, ratings in the 60s and whatnot around the time didn't really mean too much.
I believe the actual MPA rating system came out after this, because I think according to Wikipedia it said it was not rated, but I did see somewhere that they had it as G, so I went ahead and put that down.
Sure. So we'll see just how accurate that is to today's G ratings. I'm going to guess it's a little racier than your 2024 G-rated movie.
For sure. For sure.
So with that being said, let's hop back in our time machine and head back to 1961, where the top 3 movies released that year were 101 Dalmatians, grossing $102 million, West Side Story, grossing $43.7 million, and The Guns of Navarone,
Sure,
grossing $28.9 million. So we don't see Breakfast at Tiffany's on that list. I've heard of 101 Dalmatians. Don't think I've seen this 1961 version of it, though.
I think that's the original animated.
That's the animated one?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I have not watched the animated version. I've only seen the live action one with Hugh Laurie in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You haven't seen the animated one? Oh,
No,
I'm sure it's
coming.
coming.
Dalmatian guy. And I have not yet seen West Side Story. I think we intended to cover that during our musical season and had to make some cuts because it was running long. So maybe one day we'll go back and revisit that.
I'm sure we will. But I did make a note that Breakfast at Tiffany's came in at number 18 with 9.5 million, which kind of shocked me that it was so far down on the list.
Yeah, I wonder if it was late in the year or if it just became
It was October, but West Side Story also came out in October. So
true. Must have been more of a cult classic then. Maybe grew more popularity later, and we'll discover that in a deep dive maybe next week. The top 3 songs released that year were Tossin' and Turnin' by Bobby Lewis, I Fall to Pieces by Patsy Cline, and Michael by The Highwaymen. I don't know any of those songs.
Thank you, me either. I mean, maybe if we listened to them, we might recognize them, but I was going to screenshot that and I was like, I've not even heard. I've heard of Patsy Cline, but like nothing for those. So
have you seen the movie before?
I have not. Have you seen it before?
I have not. What do you know about the movie?
I know it has Audrey Hepburn in it.
That's more than I know.
I believe it's Audrey Hepburn.
All I know is, and I said, what about Breakfast at Tiffany's?
Has that been stuck in my head all day today? 100%.
Literally all I know.
Yeah, I don't really know anything about it. It is the like classic, I believe it's Audrey Hepburn cover of her with the like long cigarette, and she looks very fancy, and that's all I know. So I am...
Spoiler alert.
Sorry if whole movie's ruined. Never mind. Scrap the podcast. Done. Just kidding.
Yeah,
yeah, I'm excited. Let's drink some more wine and enjoy Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Wait. Before we do that, let's guess what it's going to be about then.
Ooh, okay.
I'm going to guess that these two people meet at a breakfast date at their friend Tiffany's house, and that's where they originally meet, and then they start dating. There's a misunderstanding and they get into like a big fight, and they reunite when their friend Tiffany tricks them into coming back together to almost like relive that same moment, and that's what causes them to fall back in love.
I love that guess. I am going to go more for like a Pretty Woman style. Like they meet, she like falls upward in societal class by meeting this person. That becomes their source of conflict as they are from different class systems. But he like gives her all these things.
And they like have so much money they literally are able to have breakfast at like a Tiffany's store.
Or something fancy.
Like, I eat jewelry for breakfast.
Exactly, just a bowl of diamonds. So the mental image just came in. Keep it straight. But I mean, she just like what I know of the cover. She like looks very classy and put together. That I'm thinking it's some kind of like rags to riches style love story.
I'm thinking Tiffany's a friend. You're thinking Tiffany's a store. We'll see who's right.
All right. So now we'll enjoy our wine and Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Cheers.
Cheers. Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Tiffany was my favorite character by far.
Oh man, I cannot wait to get into our recap for this movie. But
before we
first,
do that, the wine scale this week is a little bit different, given that we're not drinking Tobin James nice fine wines. This time we're drinking medium shelf wines, such as the Josh Capsav Reserve from 2021.
Paso Robles, California.
Yes. So this scale is a little different in that it's going to be more realistic. I think we'll say about a 5 is more of a like a take it. Under 5 is a leave it. And like over 7.5 is a you should probably order this. Below 2.5, you should just spit it out.
Okay.
That being said, I'm going to put this one at a 5.3.
Given that scale, I'd give it a 5.6.
Yeah.
It was good.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I think I will still taste the black box and be like, that was better.
It was better when airing it out a little bit, twirling it, swirling it.
You love to give a good twirl.
It did open it up a little bit. It was a bit tart originally and not quite carbonated, but there was a little bit of that almost characteristic to it. When swirling it a little bit, it kind of mellowed out a little bit. It was a bit more drinkable. It was okay.
It is just amazing to me that like a Tobin James wine, or if you go to a winery and you taste their wines, there is just so much more like nuance and layers and flavor. And I mean, I guess it's because these are so much more mass produced that maybe it's a little more simple. Like simple is the word that kept coming to mind. It was like, there's like, I take a sip, it's wine, it tastes fine, but there's not more to it compared to what we've been drinking.
Also the fact that they just like, this is their reserve. It's almost like that's your reserve.
Yeah.
No offense to our boy Josh. Has some good Joshies, but this was of, I don't know. It wasn't, I honestly prefer just normal
I mean,
Josh.
again, I think I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I think we're just to the point where we're really spoiled. Like we've had enough of like really quality wine, all of which we rate like 5, but like it's so good. And then you have stuff that like is more produced in larger quantities and just doesn't have that like attention to detail that like a lot of these like smaller wineries have. And you just, I don't know, you just like taste a really big difference. And I feel like I get why people are wine snobs, I think.
Yeah, there is a difference in like wine and like fine wine. Like,
do you think we could join the Finer Things Club now? Because we like are so into fine wines.
Haters. Well, let's taste a bit of the black box and see if our thoughts on this one change.
I'll let you taste it because I've already had a sip, but I will say I was really thinking about it on the like wine scale of the scale, if you know, you know. And I was going to give it a 3.
Yeah.
On the wine
That's
scale.
about right. I was going to say a 2.6. If this was on the Tobin James scale.
Yeah. I think I kind of went back and forth. I settled on a 3. It could have gone lower.
Yeah.
I don't think it could have gone higher, but it could have gone a little lower. I was just being generous.
Yeah. Tasting the black box right now, the black box is pretty muted. It's like the range is very compressed. It's like when you...
Josh was still better than the black box. But there's like less of a jump. This
is like when you're trying to like, show like a picture of like a nature scenery, whatever, and you've only got like 12 shades of green. It just feels like you're kind of limited in what you can really express there. It's just kind of like the black box is not bad. It's just kind of like really compressed range of what you get from it.
Okay, I get that.
So, anyways, enough about the wine. Let's move on to our movie rating out of 10.
Do you want me to go first?
I'll let you go first on this one.
I will probably change it and slept on it, but I think I'm going to give it a 3.2.
3.1. We are very close there.
Oh, I love that. I was about to give it like a 2.8. And then I gave it a little more again because of I know it is a very iconic movie in a lot of ways. I'm not sure why.
How iconic is it outside of the song?
I mean, I feel like, I know what the movie poster art looks like. Like, I know Audrey Hepburn's a big part of it. I know she is such a like fashion icon and I mean, was just such a big part of the pop culture at that time. Again, we were not around in 1961, so I don't really know.
I think maybe we'll uncover more in our
I'm very interested to do some research on this because I tried to avoid a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I have so many questions.
But for my rubric, like, you know, how much did I enjoy it? How like quotable / rewatchable is it? How culturally significant is it? And like for this season, how like romantic and comedic is it? Enjoyable, not much.
No. I a little bit think that if it was on TV, I would watch it. Mostly from I'm not sure what I watched. I need to see parts. I don't want to sit down and watch it all again, but like I think I need to like know what I was missing the first time.
I think I can go the rest of my life without seeing more of it, and I'd be probably okay with it. It's just not very rewatchable. If it was on like, you know, TBS, probably going to be like, well, we'll see what else is on. Mm-hmm. Cultural significance is like a slight edge because like of the song and like maybe the fashion that thing.
You are going to deep dive the song for next week.
This was curious. Not very romantic and not very comedic.
Yeah, I feel like it really, like my 9 elements of the comedy was compressed down into about 45 seconds of the whole 2 hours that we watched. Also, like, well, let's get into the rest of the notes and then we can pull up those
yes. I think we have
elements
something to talk about.
Yes.
So, movie description. I will go first. Woman in New York meets guy in New York in an apartment. She's having a whole bunch of flings, whatever, trying to discover herself. He falls madly in love with her. A lot of baggage ensues for both of them, and they make out in the rain.
That's an excellent way to end that story.
You know, just yada, yada, yada. Just
yeah, it is a yada, yada kind of story. I'm still not sure how that movie was 2 hours because I think, like I said, most of it happened in like 5 minutes of the story. Anyways, our description according to the TV is Holly is a deliciously eccentric New York City playgirl determined to marry a Brazilian millionaire. I almost read that as Brazilianaire because I just wasn't reading it right.
But also that part is like that's
the last 4 seconds.
I was gonna say that's a solid 14 minutes out of a 2-hour movie that happens.
George Peppard plays her next door neighbor, a writer who is quote unquote sponsored by a wealthy Patricia Neal. Guessing who's the right man for Holly is easy. What?
Yeah, it's a terrible description.
It's like one of the worst ones we've had in a while. Mm-hmm. I feel like I do feel like Sci-Fi did a really good job with their descriptions. Like I feel like most of the time I was like, oh, that was pretty good.
This description seems like it's someone who watched the first minute, fast forwarded about 80% through, and then watched the last 2 minutes.
Agreed. Not good.
It's like you kind of missed most of the movie there. Not that I went in depth in all of it, but
yeah,
just gonna say mine's better.
Was the movie what you expected?
No.
Should I replay your guess from the beginning of the show? I just want to know
where Tiffany is.
Do you know the like deep feeling of victory I felt when she literally ate breakfast at Tiffany's in the first 4 seconds of the movie?
Damn you, Tiffany.
He was so mad, and I was just like, yes.
I've never been so let down so quickly in my expectation of what a movie was.
Was I totally correct in my whole movie summary? No. But did I think it involved actual Tiffany and Co.? Yes. So
you were
win for me.
You were like an 88% correct. I was a 0.88% correct in that there were people.
I still believe that you were holding on to hope that Tiffany would come in until the credits rolled.
I just wanted some semblance of a person named Tiffany. I wanted them to have breakfast at that person's house.
I'm so sorry. But I tell you what, I would love to eat a croissant and drink a coffee outside of Tiffany's in New York.
Yeah. Just really missing Tiffany. Anyways.
Okay, good.
Did they say the title of the movie in the movie? They did not.
I don't think so.
Oh shit, we skipped a couple questions there.
I was just following your lead.
How well did it age?
I thought it aged fine. I mean, as far like, I often forgot I was watching a movie that was filmed in 1961, apart from the like obvious style differences. Mm-hmm. I didn't notice too much like technically that was off. And
I think part that did not age well at all was the landlord.
Ooh.
That part was bad. It was clearly not someone who was Asian.
It was an immediate like,
yeah.
yikes.
One of those things where it's like, in the time, it was probably funny. That was probably like a big comedic part of this whole rom-com thing. It was very cringy seeing a very white man,
Big old red flag. Yeah.
playing a very Asian man in a very like, not stereotypical, but like over-exaggerated stereotypical fashion. Was
Like caricature.
yes, for sure.
Yeah.
That part did not
Poor
age
taste.
well at all. Also, they could have been completely scrapped that whole character from the movie. I get it was-
I kept kind of waiting for him to be explained a little more or to have a little bit more of a tie-in. And I just never got that. I felt like that way about most of the characters, like Patricia or no, whatever.
2E.
2E.
Yeah.
I was like, who is this woman? What really is her purpose? I need like a true, like very obvious, explain it to me. What's her deal? And I felt like I didn't really get that.
This was based on a book. I'm assuming the landlord, neighbor person was also in that book. But also, as someone making a movie, you can also like take some artistic liberties and change that around a bit. Nowadays, very much would not have been that.
Definitely not.
Would have either been played by someone who's actually Asian or just decided not to play into that entire stereotype and played a little differently.
Yeah.
And either nix the character or someone different. But yeah, that part did not age well at all.
That's true.
Also, I think some of the, not say themes, but the way he talked about like love of like, you belong to me, and some of those things were
I will not be in a cage.
a bit strong, but
I also feel like she was she was very like real in herself, and like when she was in the apartment, just like walking around in her clothes. Just I feel like I can very much see that character in like Girls or something that's more modern, and also like coming right out of the gates talking about anxiety and just like, I mean, didn't use the word anxiety, but just calling it like it is. And I feel like that was something that, I mean, felt very progressive, that I didn't think that was talked about too often.
well, and
in
props
the 60s.
to the strong woman of 2E, obviously like having an affair or whatever and all that sort of stuff, but also the lady cop, some of the things that just you don't really expect to see in like 60s movies.
Yes.
That was, good in some ways, but the whole
There was
yeah.
bad, there was fine, there was stuff that felt a little ahead of its time, but
could this movie be made today?
yes.
I think yes, it'd be, like we said, a little bit differently.
I think we'd have a little bit easier time understanding what they're saying. I don't know if it was just the audio was really bad, or if their accents were just so over the top that I was like, and the way they spoke was different than how we speak, that it was like, I felt like we should have watched it with subtitles, I think.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of the transatlantic accent in a lot of this that kind of almost started turning into a British accent in some ways.
And so I have a note that says her accent is the worst. And then I looked it up and she's not American. So I was like, okay, maybe it's not. Because I thought it was that like transatlantic accent. And I was like, okay, that's super annoying. Like, I don't know why that was ever a thing. That's the worst. And so I'm like, well, she's not American, so like it makes a little bit more sense, but it's still just like, darling, like just say what you need to say. We don't need all the dramatics.
If this were made today, who do you think would play her? I have an idea in my head. Today, plus or minus 10 years.
Okay, the minus 10 years, I would give it Marnie from Girls.
I was going to say Keira Knightley.
Ooh, also good.
I think she would have been really good in that role. As for a male, I was having a hard time.
Because nobody looks like that anymore.
I was between, I don't know his name. He played Plop in The Office / in Christmas Narratives.
Jake. It's a very generic sounding name. Jake something, yeah.
Or all the way up to Brad Pitt.
I feel like he has the like confidence swagger that you kind of need to be that character, but he's like too old.
Ryan Gosling, just you need someone who just like could play a very good
Ryan Gosling,
a really good like I'm a pretty face. Obviously, Ryan Gosling was Ken. Like he was very good at playing the I'm just Ken. Right, someone like that. But I think that Keira Knightley could have done a really good job playing her.
Yeah, I see that.
When they were in the taxi, I was really like seeing. I was like, okay, I could very much see her saying these lines and doing these things.
Yeah, I can see it. I mean, I think if I had more time, I could probably come up with somebody else, but I just said Girls, and that was at the top of my list. And I feel like she kind of has that Audrey Hepburn look. She could pull off a lot of those.
It'd be a much more
dresses.
modern vibe versus a more just recreation of this if it was her, but I could very much see it. This is the title of the movie. We already covered that. Does the title fit the movie? Not really.
Not really, because she eats breakfast at Tiffany's in the first 5 seconds, and then she goes back once and mentions it like twice, and that's it.
Yeah. I don't even know like what I would go for a title of something, but like it's obviously based on a book, so there is that. I don't know, something about like, I say the word darling a lot, but I think that'd be really obnoxious of a title of a movie. I don't know.
Darling would actually. That's pretty good.
Yeah. It kind of fits in a whole bunch of weird ways. But
Yeah.
Anyways, were there any actors that went on to do bigger things?
So I feel like these older movies are tricky for us because like I don't know where in the timeline of these people's lives that this movie fell and whether or not
She obviously
they were.
is a recognizable name.
Yes, and Mickey Rooney was obviously in it, and he did a whole bunch of stuff before and a whole bunch of stuff after. I think this was whatever the guy's name, Paul, whatever that actor's name was. I want to say this was. I think this was his first film, or very early on. I don't know how much more he did after that.
I definitely hadn't really seen him in any other things, and it's like a recognizable name from what I can tell. So,
nothing jumps out to us.
Sure. What impact do you think this movie had on pop culture? Cover this a bunch. The song.
Yeah, the song. Well, I was gonna say I think Audrey Hepburn's fashion in this is a big pop culture statement. Just like the dresses, just her hair. And she may have had some of the style before and after, but I feel like the fashion from her is just super, super iconic from this.
I feel like half the stuff she wore kind of reminded me of like a 1920s kind of what I would imagine. But then other things were kind of like really weird and out there type stuff that I can see that being more influencing other things.
Oh, I loved her pink dress though. Oh my gosh, beautiful.
Do you feel cultured after watching it?
Yes. I'm glad I know what it is. And I mean, again, we know the song. I've heard of it before, and I've never seen an Audrey Hepburn film before either. So I think just kind of actually being like, okay, that is her face. Like this, seeing her act, hearing her talk, like doing all that. I took a lot from that.
Yeah, I'm going to say I feel like I can check the box. I don't really feel super cultured. I can say that I've seen it though.
I think I feel more cultured after watching this than I did after 2001: A Space Odyssey. Because 2001: A Space Odyssey is a lot more in your realm of life, and you'd heard of it. I had
influenced a lot more things, and I see it referenced a lot more than
I had not ever heard of it. I knew nothing about it. I mean, I guess I had heard some references of it, but I didn't know what they were from. Like, I didn't really know anything about it. I feel like I've heard about this movie a lot more, and this one checks a bigger box for me.
Yeah.
All right, so time to go into notes. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
You can go first.
Okay, so my first note is the classic scene happening in the first 5 minutes. And again, I don't really know any of the scenes of this movie off the top of my head, but the fact that she ate breakfast at Tiffany's, and that's the title of the movie, and that happened right off the bat.
It's like a recurring theme, especially in season 1 of like, you want to see
season 1
movies, just watch the first 45 seconds and you've seen all you need.
And honestly, still after this, I feel like if I'd only watched if I'd turned it off after 1 minute, I would have seen enough. But
yeah, see, my first note was Tiffany and Co. right off the effing bat. Just damn it.
Like I said, he was so out loud. He was, damn it.
Lost the bet right there.
Yep. And then my next note is walk of shame ? Was she walk of shaming from someone's house and coming home? I mean, she said it was 6 a.m., which she still considers night. I don't know who considers 6 a.m. night, because I think most people consider that day. And she was all dolled up and fancy, and some man was chasing her home, even though he was like really old and creepy. I kind of think she was doing a little walk of shame.
Lady of the night, I think so.
I loved her tassel earplugs. I thought those were hilarious. I'm shocked that no one has tried to do that, and I'm sure they have. The internet's a crazy place. I'm sure you can find that. Try to do that with their AirPods to make them look like tassels.
I have a note that says that. I said, new idea, AirPods with tassels. Well, actually, it autocorrected to airports with tassels, but point still stands.
Yes.
Like, I'm just shocked that that's not an actual thing to just like decorate or have like AirPods that look like they're those fancy breakfast at Tiffany's tassels.
But she's
Ugh,
just
it's
so
hard to say.
freaking classy. I mean, even with her crazy face mask and her tassel earplugs, she's just so elegant. And so, and I very much understand why a generation of people were just like so enraptured by her. I couldn't understand anything she was saying. I kind of thought her character was annoying, but just like, you know, like watching her move, she's so very elegant. And even when she was in her crazy eccentric state, eccentric is definitely the right word for her.
I think it was like in a very intentional contrast of like her outward appearance, where she's this big, fancy, over, you know, looks well put together person, and then you see her apartment is not that. It is just all chaos everywhere, just completely disheveled. And I think that was kind of like, here's the inside.
She's all talk, but she doesn't. I mean, she's like what, Lula Mae from Texas or whatever. Got married at 14. We'll get there in a second.
Yeah.
Anyways, I talked about how they mentioned anxiety, which I thought was really interesting. And not, I mean, again, they didn't directly address it as anxiety, but it's definitely what she was getting after. Her bathtub sofa. Did you notice that? I was going to point it out, and I was like, no, he has to notice this, but I should know by now that you didn't. Her sofa, her main sofa in her apartment with the pink and purple pillows on it is a bathtub that had side of it cut off because it had the faucets on one side, and it was just like cut in half that had a like little pillow on it. And
yeah, saw it didn't register.
Super eccentric and just quirky, and I loved it. Her accent is terrible. Already talked about that. Okay, and then so 2E or whatever her name is. She's a decorator that has already decorated his apartment. Whatever. That apartment is weird. The wallpaper was like really dark and like an aggressive print on the walls. And then his headboard has men that look like mermaids holding candelabras of electric candles. And I was just like, and you're like, you saw this man and you were like, this is how he wants his apartment decorated.
Well, they weren't really a interior decorator client relationship, as we found out, but also interior decorators can be really freaking weird and have no idea what an actual human's house looks like or what is actually functional for anyone.
Absolutely. It was definitely not functional. It was definitely not comfortable. Honestly, her apartment with her twin bed looked a lot more comfortable than his like gold phone. It was very over the top.
Gold phone was just kind of hilariously over the top.
Yeah, especially because I kind of thought it was there for decoration, and then he actually picked it up at one point, and I was like, oh, okay.
Speaking of phones, I also loved the dude who had the speakerphone that he called his like executive
phone. Yes,
it's like that sounds way cooler than speakerphone.
Yeah,
I'm gonna put you on executive phone, please.
Oh my god, now you're gonna start using that. Jesus. Yeah, I did appreciate a lot of the. Because I mean, obviously, this was not a tech-focused movie, but when you do see that technology in like even like the library cards in the library, and just thinking, wow, things are very different now.
That Dewey Decimal System, back when it was actually necessary.
My next note is ninth richest man in America, and so my note about it was that's an impressive stat to know without, because especially since there's no Wikipedia or internet to just quickly, that you have to, I mean, she mentioned at one point, like call into the New York Times or do something, like to figure that information out is very impressive. But then I started Googling, but then I was also still trying to watch the movie, is I wonder how much, like in 1961 standards, the richest man in America would make the ninth richest man in America. Like what would that be in 1961? I did find out that in 2024, the ninth richest person in the world makes like $117 billion or has $117 billion in assets.
Just a couple.
And that was just overwhelming. And then I was like, I'll figure this out later. I'll try to deep dive it for next time. But.
Yeah. This is the ninth richest person in America under 50. There's a couple qualifiers there. Also, this was back before you could fact check things, and he could have been bullshitting.
And she is someone that could easily be bullshitted. So, and speaking of easily being bullshitted, she was married at 14. I wonder how common that was in the 60s and earlier.
Especially because the actor that played her husband was like 21 years older, and that is creepy as shit. That's a 35-year-old and a 14-year-old.
And especially because we are quickly approaching 35. And just like I've seen, I know some teenagers, some, I mean, not specifically 14-year-olds, but we have family members that are around that age, like, and just looking at them and being like, you are so little. Ugh.
Very, very, very messed up.
Yeah. No, thank you.
I can see why she might have a little bit of, trauma and relationship issues and anxiety and all that stuff.
Homegirl needs some therapy. Like she would really, BetterHelp, I don't know.
Better parents. Something. I don't know.
I was just trying to get her a sponsor or us a sponsor.
Either one. Better parents if you want to sponsor us.
All right. And then my last note is that at the end, I was, doing the math like you were doing of how much older the actor was than she was, and doing that like 14 or 21 year age gap thing. And I realized that in this film, she is the same age I am now. And I just feel real derpy and just like not good about myself, because she is just, she's something, that's for sure. So that felt like an interesting, I don't know. I think I probably would have pegged her as like 25 maybe. And I just feel like a very stay-at-home mom living my best life.
Not out there on
and
the streets.
She is eating breakfast at Tiffany's in her fine jewels and very fitted fancy gowns. And I'm just like wearing her big hats. I don't own any big hats.
I mean, she'd also been married for like 20 years by then, so.
Oh my God. Oh. It was annulled. But
still wild.
Yeah. So anyways, those are my notes. I probably have a lot more to say. Those are just the things I wrote down, because I still don't even really know what happened. She was like involved with the mafia. Like, I don't know.
There was just a lot to unpack in that entire movie.
I know.
A lot of storylines. Like, was the book that was based on gigantic, or did they have some liberties they took in this? I don't know.
Yeah, I've got a lot of research to do between now and next week.
It also didn't really wrap it up very well at the end. It kind of ended in the rain. Anyways, my first note being very not Asian holy shit when they showed Mickey Rooney. Yeah.
So cringy. It was so bad.
You could tell right off the bat. I can see why that might have been funny at the time. Like I said, already covered, did not age well at all. Very necessary character. I noted at one point in the movie there was the case of the disappearing watch, and I'm not really sure why.
Continuity error.
He was wearing a watch, and I noticed it because he was facing the face of the watch towards himself, and like, who wears their watch like that? Very annoying.
I feel like it must have been, it used to be a thing of like how you're writing or whatever, that you could like much easier.
But like from one perspective in this scene where he's talking with her the first time they meet, he's wearing the watch. When they switch to the other camera, he has no watch. And they switch back, he's wearing the watch again. Very weird, and I don't really know why. Was the watch supposed to play some sort of like role in any symbolism there that I missed? I don't know.
My guess is that they had to reshoot it, and they didn't have a script supervisor to be like, but he was wearing a watch facing inward on his right hand.
Next note was all the usages of like baby, darling, and the mid-Atlantic / transatlantic accent was very much like, it would have been so annoying to live in that time period.
Yes.
It
was so distracting. Like, I really think that took away a lot from the actual plot and what was going on.
I was being like, do people really talk like that? It's just so over the top obnoxious.
It feels like it would require a lot of brain power to have to talk like that. Like, you have to really think ahead to how you're pronouncing everything and adding in all those extra like flair words and
just referring to every lady or every woman as darling and toots and baby, and oh my God, so annoying.
Fred baby.
My next note was, kept talking about $50 in the powder room, whatever, which I didn't really fully understand, but $50 in 1961, by the way, was worth $518 now.
Oh my God.
So just a solid $500 there. Anyways, next note, the fact that when, what was his name? What was the character's name of the guy?
Paul Verjak.
When Paul and 2E, whatever, she thought that she was being followed, so he went out there to see what's going on. He like goes around and he's like walking in public places, kind of keeping tabs on this guy that's following him, and then decides to walk to a place that's completely empty, away from people, and be like, "This is where I'm going to hang out." What if the guy was trying to kill you? What if there was something nefarious going on?
Right.
Like, is that really your best shot? Like, you're doing a good job of kind of like leading him and like kind of keeping tabs on him. But then like maybe find somewhere where you walk down a street, whatever, and like duck behind something until he gets close. So you can like confront the guy and be like, "Why are you following me?" Going to somewhere that's like completely abandoned, kind of risky.
Yeah. Or honestly, I would even just like cycle back all the way back to the apartment. So I was like close by to people that could recognize me, instead of just being like all the way in Central Park. I don't know how Central Park was.
Just back in the 60s. I mean, you could have just gotten shot and just been disappeared.
Yeah. I don't know how far Central Park was from her apartment, but weird.
We covered the marrying a 14-year-old. We did not cover the fact that they went to like a strip club.
Oh, yeah. Rated G? I don't think so.
Right.
And she's like, don't bring me home unless I'm drunk. Like, So I used to be an elementary school teacher. If you've been following along, you probably know that. You are allowed to show G-rated movies in your classroom. I would get in so much trouble if I had shown this to my students for a lot of reasons.
They'd have a little bit of trauma too.
But that, I was just like, this is not rated G. At least PG, but I would definitely say PG-13.
I did find it interesting just how many women were in that strip club though.
Yes.
Just hanging out, you know?
Inclusive to all.
Maybe they're there for the breakfast buffet. Eggs and legs, baby. I had a note that the Tiffany's salesman, if this movie were made today, would have been played by Mr. Bean.
You're right. I'm sorry. I'm still recovering from eggs. You're going to see me laughing tomorrow and you're going to be like, oh, she's still laughing about it. Can't even say it, eggs and legs.
Breakfast buffet at a strip club. There you go.
Okay, keep going. Yes, Mr. Bean,
Yes.
100%. Were you expecting him to do the like flourish and the Love Actually?
The whole Love Actually, especially if Keira Knightley was in this, we could have done a whole reenactment of Love Actually.
So do you just want to recast the whole movie with Love Actually people?
I do. I really do.
You know what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Next note was there was a montage. We talked about this in our little checklist of all those things. The montage of them like going through New York City, doing all these like little fun cutesy things.
The 5 and 10 store and
it reminded me a lot of Elf.
Yes, that store also reminded me of the joke shop in Hairspray that Tracy's dad owns. Just like a lot of like quirky little stuff in there.
I see that, but just doing like all the cutesy things in New York and then going through like the revolving door, all those things. I just kept getting
it was
Elf
very
vibes.
Elf scenes. I think it also reminds me of Hairspray because Hairspray also took place in 1962, which was like time period wise, it was very on brand.
My final note was Keira Knightley would have been playing her if this was recast or remade today. And so that's end of my notes.
Let's quickly go back to our 9 elements of a rom-com just to quickly wrap everything up tonight. So the first one is 2 lovable leads. Like, yes, there are 2 leads. I did not like her. I thought he was very sensible and like a reasonable person, and I thought he was kind of pretty. I appreciated her realness, but I also she was just like a lot for me.
Yeah, especially with the accent.
That was hands down the hardest part. A meet cute. They did. She buzzed him in and brought him into her apartment and was just like wearing her AirPods. And I'm going to stick with AirPods for that part.
I think they were just called pods back then.
Probably. Or plugs. Earplugs. That's what we'll call them. A unique, troublesome situation. She's involved in the mafia and they weirdly are neighbors with a weird...
Pretty unique.
Yep. And... also just falls in love with or throws herself at random rich men.
In fact, he's also like a male gigolo type thing, maybe. I don't know.
I really need a lot more information on that.
Like he had a sugar mama in some ways, at least.
Yeah, it was weird. At least one great sidekick. I don't really know that either one of them had a sidekick.
Unless you count the landlord.
No.
But otherwise.
Or like, I guess Tui is not really a sidekick. She gets him the apartment. But
we're gonna nix that one. Did not have that point.
Super fun montage.
For
we
sure.
had that. Relationship in jeopardy. So
the entire time.
Yes, but I also feel like the relationship in jeopardy, the light bulb moment, the grand gesture, and epic one-lining and happy ending, they all happened in the taxi cab in the last 5 minutes of the movie.
I don't really know if there's ever a light bulb moment though.
But like you kind of see her like pause and follow him. She's like still putting her makeup on and he's gone out and she goes to follow him and then they find the cat and then they kiss each other. I was kind of checking these off in my head as we were watching it and I was like, okay. And then the movie just ended and I was like, oh, so literally the last half of the list was in this cab in the last couple minutes of the movie.
I'll get a 7.5 out of 9 there. Is it 9 things? Yeah.
It was not to the extreme. I did really, in the moment though, appreciate the montage. I'm glad you brought that up too.
RomCom rubric. Is that what we're going to call it? I don't know.
I think you're going to need to sleep on it. Because I think How Noir Yar came the next week. Like I think it's
we got time.
Yeah, we'll come back to it. So, I don't know. I'm feeling a little less excited now that we're into this. I mean, I know we have a lot of good ones that I'm looking forward to, more like the 80s, 90s, 2000s. But I also know that these earlier ones are like where they're still kind of figuring out what
relationships I think have changed drastically especially from how they're portrayed on screen.
100%. But I also still feel like they they are still evolving into what we know as the genre. And it's hard to take what you know from a genre and like move it back. So I know that I have to let go of some of my preconceived notions, but it definitely is so interesting to see how different life is.
Yep.
So
we will catch you guys next week.
Yes, for another rom-com in the 70s. So we'll catch you back next week. And if you're enjoying this podcast, if you want to subscribe and ring the notification bell if you're watching on YouTube so that you can get notified when we post new videos. And if you want to rate and review wherever you get your podcast, we would super appreciate it. You can also follow us on Instagram at Culture Night Pod. And if you have any questions, comments, recommendations, concerns, any information you want to share.
If you own a winery and you want to sponsor us,
you know, whatever, you can email us at culturenightpod@gmail.com. And I think with that, we'll see you next week.
Cheers.
Cheers.